My great-grandma was born in 1904. The movie The Birth of a Nation was released in 1915 when she was 11 years old. My great-grandma passed away when the guy you're watching right now in this video, was 13. Let that time span sink in for a little bit. She was a great and amazing woman, thank God, and the lessons she passed down to us were positivity, hard work, and kindness. But if you think the ideals and people of the 60s, the 40s, the early 1900s are history, then you're mistaken. Previous generations passed down knowledge and ideals to the next. The reality is that racism is still a part of that transaction in far too many homes. What are you doing to stop that transaction in the people and the communities that you interact with? What ideals will you pass down to the next generation? Be a good person. Be a kind person. Be quick to listen and be slow to speak. By this I mean actually listen and actually digest and evaluate others' viewpoints before responding. Always be learning, always be improving, and always do and stand up for what is right. I wanted to start with these clear and concise thoughts because I feel like they hit a lot of my feelings about what's going on in the world right now and Black Lives Matter. And I don't know how much I'm going to ramble in this video, so at least those are there at the beginning. I'm making this video because advocates in our lacrosse community are repeatedly saying that they want people to speak out and continue the conversation regarding Black Lives Matter. To this point, I've done this by retweeting, reposting, and sharing thoughts from these voices. I've had private conversations with family and friends, and now I'd like to share some of those thoughts I'm having with you all. After seeing and hearing many perspectives in our sport now, this is something that I feel for me and many others in our sport is probably long overdue. I pride myself on my dedication to constantly be learning and improving on a personal and human level. I think Scott Ratliff said it very succinctly. He said, "Humility is something worth practicing. The more I learn, the less I know." Hashtag Black Lives Matter. With this mindset comes a humility that I don't always have the right answer or opinion. One of the best ways for me to improve as a human is by listening and understanding the opinions of others who both agree or disagree with my hypotheses about life. For the most part, this is the exact opposite of what you'll see from people on Twitter. Which is why continuing these conversations online is so frustrating and disheartening, and yet so necessary. So if you're going to join in, please be respectful and think deeply before you type. Our online platforms can be a very effective way to inspire change. Specifically to me, I believe long-form content is most effective. So maybe my issue is really more with Twitter than it is the online environment in general as a platform for social change. My general opinion of Twitter and some IG comment sections is that it cultivates a community of negative, one-sided, closed-minded individuals. I have a hard time understanding how this behavior helps heal the division we feel in our communities. No matter how much you do to support and speak up on these issues, it'll never be enough for some people. In our lacrosse community, I've seen this in the form of pushback and questioning every time the Black Lacrosse Alliance, Paul Rabel, the PLL, or whoever else makes a statement supporting some of these social justice movements. They say things like stick to lacrosse or keep politics out of it, and the list goes on. Paul Rabel is the LeBron James of our sport, and so I want to talk about him specifically in this regard. This man has done everything he can to support the movements of everyone under the sun. It could not be more obvious that this is the case. And yet he's still accused of falling short and having not addressed these issues. How discouraging it must be for Paul and other advocates in our sport to be constantly hearing these types of responses. I just honestly don't understand how you can come to this conclusion after everything that Paul, the PLL, the Black Lacrosse Alliance, and other advocates have said and done regarding these issues. Continuing these conversations online for me is very hard for that reason. There's no box you can check on your driver's license or universal website that can identify you as publicly anti-racist. This video would serve as great proof of where I stand, but eventually it's going to be buried by other Sidewalls Lacrosse content. Paul and the Black Lacrosse Alliance have made hundreds of posts regarding these issues, and yet they're still continually questioned. Other players are being quickly judged for not posting or saying enough, and while I don't fully disagree with that, I think part of the growing pains of this process is us becoming a more educated member of this community and using our voice to help impact this change. This is one of the huge positives that I see happening in the current movement, is that it's effectively encouraging people who look like me to speak out and become an ally for Black Lives Matter and help impact real change that's going to help our Black brothers and sisters. So while I wish for me and other players we would have spoken out publicly on these issues much earlier, understand that the actions and character displayed by these guys in person will almost always more accurately represent them as compared to their online accounts. Take, for example, the PLL MVP, Zed Williams. He doesn't have these online social accounts. I think we all know where Zed stands on these issues, but does that make it right to criticize Zed for not being a more public advocate for these issues on online platforms? Or is it enough what he's doing in the communities that he's impacting in person? Who's to say? The bottom line is we've needed and need now players to speak up and be public advocates. For those speaking out online, I feel Ty Warner from the Whipsnakes and Wes Jackson from the Blacksers blog give us a great example of how to conduct ourselves and share our viewpoints in this online environment. I believe the majority of the advocates fighting for the right side of this issue have been the ones making the respectful and thoughtful comments. So I hope that doesn't get misconstrued here. But at the same time, this advice is for everyone involved in commenting and speaking out online. I understand people have the freedom to express themselves however they see fit, so maybe I'm imposing too much here. But I just feel that some people on both sides of the discussion need to generally be more thoughtful before commenting. When talking with friends and allies, they've continually stressed the importance of spreading a message of positivity and togetherness across the US and in our lacrosse community. So before you comment on other people's statements, I just want you to really think, listen, and understand what the other side is trying to say. It's apparent that some commenters just still don't quite understand the big picture of this movement. But it will be hard to change this without respectful and thoughtful discussions where people from both sides have the ability to speak their minds and grow without being berated or attacked for what they say. This is why I feel that thoughtful comments and discussion will help encourage this environment of positivity and growth rather than the environment of negativity and attacks. I share my recommendation on a simple thing we can do to help solve this at the end of the video. I loved how honest, respectful, and humble Ty Warner was while sharing his thoughts and experiences of the 2020 Championship Series. His response wasn't an angry or emotionally charged one-line tweet. It was a long-form, thoughtful, and humble dialogue that I thought was a great video to invoke real thought and change in those who saw it. This is who we should all be emulating when we join in the discussions on these topics. Wes Jackson engages in discussion with people online in a similar fashion. Long-form, thoughtful dialogue that provides substantial information for people to contemplate and reflect on the subjects at hand. When discussing the greatest threat to black equality, Martin Luther King said that it is not the white racist, but, I quote, "It is the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action." So for those of you speaking out online, I encourage you to continue to be empowered and brave, as well as send messages of support to the advocates who are speaking out on all of our behalf. God knows it's taking a huge toll mentally and emotionally, but it is what needs to be done. With that, I also want to say thank you. Thank you to Paul Rabel, Kyle Harrison, Lyle Thompson, the Black Lacrosse Alliance, Blacksers blog, Encore Lacrosse, and so many others inspiring change in our lacrosse community and around the world. Black Lives Matter. It's really as simple as that. With all this said, I want to offer a suggestion that I think can help impact real change. Starting all the way back in 7th grade, I was involved in the diversity club at school, and having adults set the example for me at such a young age is something that has stuck with me to this day. This was a long time ago, but a quick summary of what I remember about Diversity Club was that it was an adult-led group of about 10-ish kids of all colors. The adult facilitated weekly or monthly discussions regarding diversity in which the kids shared personal experiences, thought processes, and stereotypes from their own perspectives, and talked through these as a group. We also discussed the importance of diversity in our everyday lives and how we could help share this message and be the example for our peers. So, coaches and parents, I encourage you to set up in your organizations an experience similar to Diversity Club for your players. And if there are programs out there that already have something similar to this in place, I would love for you to reach out so that I can help share your structure with the rest of the lacrosse community. I think something like this would be just one great step in order to help lay a solid foundation for the youth growing up in our lacrosse community. This would also be something I'd love to see men's leagues implement as well, because it's not just the youth generation that needs to have these discussions. Sports have always been about building great men and women rather than simply just building great athletes. So let's remember that as we participate in this great game. In addition to that, keep listening to the Black Lacrosse Alliance and other advocates in our sport. Follow their example, continue the conversation, and do what they recommend in order to be an ally for finally solving racial injustice.
What is it you wanted me to reconcile myself to? I was born here almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my nieces and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?
Obviously don't know the lived experience of Brandon or Chris. I'm also a white man in America, but I have a somewhat unique perspective because I've raised a black son. And this is the Dom Smith. If you're watching the very beginning of the show, I almost started the show crying because the Dom Smith thing guts me. Because I'll try to be as quick as I can here. It's 2015 or 2016, pardon me. I'm living in Houston, Texas, and I get a handwritten death threat to my house, ostensibly because these takes have always made so many people so angry. And I call my bosses at CBS, and they say, you have to call the police. So I call the police come over, and they take it seriously. And the police are so nice, and they say, listen, we're going to take it, we're going to fingerprint it, but we're also going to send patrols by your house. And I say, thank you, and they leave. And I go inside, and I am just gripped with fear. Because at the time, it's 2016, so I have an 18-year-old, 6'2" black son who's in high school, who's always over at the house with his friends, and I say, I just signed up for the cops to come by this house. That is a tax that black families and black people have to deal with that most white families never consider. Go forward. 6 months after that, my son calls me. He's at Whataburger, 5 minutes from our house, panicked. I don't know what to do. What happened? He's there with his friends. This lady came in. She accused us of breaking into her car. We've just been sitting here. She said she's calling the cops. Should we leave? I don't know what to tell him. Do you leave and then flee and pretend, or do you stay and have a guaranteed interaction with the police? Smash cut, 3 months later. I've moved. I'm in LA. I'm commuting back and forth. My son calls me on a Saturday morning. Says, Mom's mad at me because I was so late last night. I haven't told her what happened. I think she'd be scared. What happened? She was walking through our neighborhood, home from his great friend Lucas's house. Sheriff's deputy comes by, fits the description, home invasion suspect. He's on the curb with 5 cars come up, 5 big, giant sheriff's SUVs. Running his name. Where do you live? Why don't you have ID? Because he's a damn kid. And I don't care the folks that try to manipulate the statistics and say, well, actually, your odds of being killed by the police that's not what it is. Either you have empathy and the ability to understand that for black Americans, that is the tax they have to pay every day. That their kids don't get to be full-blown kids once they're 8, 9 years old. Tamir Rice was 12, can't play with those toys no more. That you've got to tell your sons and daughters, but particularly your sons, teach them 10 and 2, yes sir, no sir. In theory you have constitutional rights, but those only exist once you get home. In the face of an interaction with the police, you get yourself out of there as quickly as possible. You call me, you do what you can, and it's just so goddamn scary. And I'm a well-to-do white guy. And it's just so frustrating that people don't see it. And they don't care. And even when they see it, when Jacob Blake gets shot 7 times in the back, people will go online and explain why, well, maybe he had it coming, or maybe he wasn't that good of a guy. And so I appreciate the NBA trying to bring this to the forefront, but it's just too much.
Kenny. This is tough. I mean, right now my head is like ready to explode, like just in the thoughts of what's going on. And I don't know if I'm even appropriate enough to say it, what the players are feeling and how they're feeling. And I haven't talked to any of the players. But like coming in, even like driving here and getting into the studio, hearing calls and people talking. And for me, I think the biggest thing now is to kind of, as a black man, as a former player, I think it's best for me to support the players and just not be here tonight. And figure out what happens after that. Yeah. I just don't feel equipped to do that.
And I respect that. Shaquille.
The fact that everybody was...
They're mulling that over. Baseball's trying to come up with a solution, saying, no, you know, it'd be super powerful. Three of us here can't leave this room. They're saying, you know, it'd be really great if you just have them all take the field. Then they leave the field. And then they come back and play at 8:10. And I was like, what? What's that? Rob. Because Jeff's scheduling's going to be a nightmare. There's so much at stake. And I said, Jeff, that's not happening.
They're not dealing with reality.
They're not playing, but that's Rob's instinct. And Rob, not exactly what you and I were talking about. At leadership level, he doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it. And
That's so...
anyway, so we're waiting. Jeff wants to hear, as soon as we hear from the Marlins, Conforto, whatever we do, we need to coordinate with the Marlins. So as soon as Conforto hears from Rojas, right, Miguel Rojas?
Yeah.
Let me know, because Jeff's standing by for that call, and then we can